Let me remind every one of ourselves here to take a moment and cultivate the highest form of motivation. We called it bodhicitta motivation, or the altruistic motivation, seeking complete enlightenment for the benefit of all other sentient beings. At least with that kind of contrived bodhicitta motivation, we should participate in this Lamrim teaching on the stage of the path leading to enlightenment by Manjushri Lama Tsongkhapa or Jermuche. Allow me to read about a page or two from this great Lamrim Chemo, the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment by Lama Tsongkhapa, volume number 3 in the English translation, and from page 178.
ye de le de du zhuang zhang ong zhu dang zu le de du zhuang ni ne yin mu dang min min zhe de jin be lo do ge ni me de ong zhu zu de du ji ba ge mi ge de de ji ba ni ra xin me se ge de ji be ri be men du ba cong jiang ri be ne me ne na ba ba dan ji de me se be de ra ye de ngo mo nang jin de ba tu mo ye be kun da bi song ji me 샤메 당 다당 zuo da wang zhou lao zuo na ni wei sa na ba zhang zhou ba tin zhou rang gi wo zhou ba yin mi ri bi zhen de ni wei da zhe bei ri bi tong de da ni ba sam ni xia ba yin bei de zhou da ra yin mi zhe bei ri bi zhe ba xin ji wei zhe ba ke lang go ba yin de wo na tong de ri bi zhe su de देव शिव तथा चे बा नो रि पा चे मा मे वे ता पे खुर से बा मे जो तथा रे पे मा नि नो के बन जे देव तथा के ता ये न रि पा तथा के ये के वे से रो सु र लो सो नो नि ता नि वे शिव से नो के चु जु ने बा मे बा नम ला छे ता ता बा ता ता शा बा ता yin जे वे ता ला चे ता चा मा接得到他也咱们的同济因是得了这初步用的选择这不的让我这边让新业为陆续些年开两百没为的了这因为是这边是不是这没同的都这边就是对面对边是别人那的路没那些没把那大人嘛让不些因是这的没那这玩意今天呢，他们那边这边同意讲这边那边那他也对要买吧呢，没这边我那，让我找大把等今天让给我这边我这边我等我一万真吧等看上给人你们怎么说？越南人别今天那差吧的差，看着他们家的我们别个的外面。카지게 소자소 등 모두게 따바 나마테데 미 충비 주제데 나마 지된 탐제라 차바당 시마 주도 뭐 코나 차비 제로 시마 니 넘버 마제바다 미디베 시에다 타니데 수소 나 수소 지마도 이바데 미메고 라랑 오조요고 바른 지바 소라 망라 리버 주주에 저발에 저한테 신제로 대와 라서 보니들 와강 이바데 군조도 당니 대고보데 넘버를 메네바 임바 이셰로 신제 마로 번외등 라서 예데 저바데 고보데 군조도 다인들 이셰 시에 따서 시보 지된 라 투모도 차장 대릉을 군조도 신제로 되시라 미타스바 시바지데라 제데라 마타짱 테레젠바 신심몰로 송소 데다 풍부 메타소즈미 르진베 도바네 노일라 추영 예베 제나라 체마이 체미 네바 메베 신제 몰로바 모조 시샤라 엉부시바 노네 노일라 추싱 모조 샤 신영 메베 모조 시메쇼 어히나 노라 추바 자연 지대베我나와 또 지도 되베 또 이와도 메고 송년소 나베 안시 나로베 군조인라 텔레셰베 안시 네메 나와야다 군조인 노pom보 다발로서 본제베 도베벤제나지 얘네 탄예 되어 메병고 뭐 눈장 메다바서 보바즈베 네 탄예데 예바리 베고 보내서 동담바라랑 오제베 도소시 미세바 현대 디니소 주베 메다소 시영 미세베 대혼을 때네니 제여바르 제바 현재 말로바 다 현재 말로 현재 로 말로게 나에 메와라 공원이 수다 메다당 대도당 다이메 강랑양 저주는 세마를 제버를 송소 다키자 너도 대신도 대인설이 다 건지 그래서 타니에디발 다 그래서 타니베 시바 잡아 이제 타니베 세마시지 민을 때거나 이제 리베드바 뭐 송근다 타니베 시바세야 가르서 타니베 시바세야 돼 이제 데레스 아니 지데랑가 유지고 요거 말했지 ini juda lo shingo ganga gyula ini tani be sama yoris. Kundu juda lo gyurde gyordi shina kundu juda lo gyna kundu shiba ganga ini juda lo gyi shiba mi chagmare ini hinji lo mangbo yoris. Tati ti karsena da tani be shiba da tani be sama se ati kiza ini jide ranga jigo chagmare ini juda lo gyo gyurma gyo ganga le chagres la ro. Oti jizen shigase.
Gisela read from the bottom of page 178 to page 182 on the top. So that was Blessing of Oral Transmission for us, and now he's starting his explanation. As we talked about this last week, and you find it on page 178, three conditions must be met in order to affirm that a phenomenon exists conventionally. Right? How do we know a thing or a phenomenon exists conventionally? If we ask Prasangika Madhyamikins, they said, well, here are the three conditions that must be fulfilled. Okay? And these three conditions are met, then we say that phenomenon exists conventionally. And as a part of that discussion we had, so we talked about how, it has to be something known to what we call conventional consciousness. Okay? And so then we said, who has it, conventional consciousness, right? That's the question. And where does it exist? And so it exists in the minds of what we call mundane people like us, or worldly beings like us. And so that all, but it doesn't mean just the ordinary people like us has it, but it also exists in the minds of those who have what we call who subscribe to, or who have been educated in some philosophical standpoints as well, right? Of course, their minds are a little more sophisticated, relatively speaking, because they subscribe to some philosophical standpoint or whatever it may be. But it doesn't mean that all kinds of perceptions these people have are to do with a philosophical standpoint. Okay? They also have what is called conventional consciousness, right? Which help us to understand or define how a thing exists conventionally.
Tētēn jīgdēn chākwa shēdār yīn jīgdēn yīmbū chūptār chākwa khunā lā chēpa māyīn chī gō chīgū jī mā jī bē lō yīn chūktū lā shēdār chūpa tē bē shōpa yīn nōs shēdār tē tāñi bē lō sēyādi mā jī bē lō sēyādi yīni yīmbū bē chūptār lō mā yō khunā mā rē yīni chūptār chē mā jī gāngā yō lō sōsō mā ñam yung chō chī bā sām lō tōng dā yīni lō mā jī lō khātī yung tō tē hā kō kō rō bā sō kō.
And so it is, as it's stated here on page 179, that conventional consciousness is a non-analytical, non-inquisitive kind of a consciousness. Right? It does not analyze whether something exists, how does something exist, how does it appear to exist, and how it actually exists. So it doesn't analyze, or it's not a curious George about such things. It just simply, relates to objects, and it is a non-analytical, fashion, if you will. And that kind of non-analytical conventional consciousness exists in the minds of what we call maybe illiterate, uneducated, people, as well as it exists in the minds of those who are more sophisticated in the sense of have, some philosophical education or standpoint as well.
시바들 저번노 뉴에타인도 비실겨 남소 스타다다 차차세데 다 디스고 저 차바니 나와시도 거 메나 나쇼고 바카리나 지다 뉴아세네 비지 무슨 또 도문을 지다 뉴아서는 무슨 또 뉴아세그라 봐 제가 지된 비게 애니 그 무슨 나와 또 봐고 딘데질 실줄라 애니 타니베 시발 차바 세그레스 다 딘데선자 애니 레데 딘데도 애니 그 토존도 셰네 애니 셰고 말에 디게 애니 그래서 랑가 그 조토고 뭐라 say no.
No, sir.
디소티아 이네 렌데라서 들어간가 tö바시아 용화도 그 삼로던 유일라 강에 제일 뭐 이제 리베 제바시는 디데야 딱동된 시작해 말봐.
No, right.
그 대박 곰 애는 그 등에 곰 디데시는 거 자오야 지금 뭐 이제 그 제바 로 지고요 말봐.
No, right.
저디 또 렌데가 랑도라서 그 강가 애는 디 타니베 시발 마다베 종요 말이라고 다
No,
간게.
sir. No, sir. So conventional consciousness or Tanya Besheva in Tibetan, it is a non-analytical, consciousness that worldly people, ordinary people experiences. And because our ordinary people, we have direct experience or perception of things, right? And that's so those things are known to our ordinary non-analytical perceptions. So then a critic asks, okay, in that case, what about the law of karmic actions and outcomes, right? That seems to require a lot of study, right, and thinking. And the cause and effect relationships, because ordinary people really do not understand the law of karmic actions and their outcomes, I mean, don't they exist, conventionally? And how are they known to conventional consciousness, if you ask, right? And so in response to that, it is explained that for ordinary people, the way we generally perhaps relate to karmic actions, outcomes, is more on the sense of a belief system, okay? We do not engage in them necessarily analytically, or we have to, right? We just believe that, okay, create good karmas, good outcomes, bad karma, bad outcomes, right? And just believe in that. And that, in a sense, is good enough to say that karmic actions and outcomes exist for conventional consciousness. They don't have to engage in a critical study of karmas, what is karma and what is the dimensions and, all of that,
Perna tabal karsa tanyebe sama shin neba ne perna tabal rula nyamba de migul shu nyam zemba na yilu de chita jeba maybe lu song yimo jang ti song ton de la tanyebe sama cheme nebe tida tanye de me do sida di tanyeba sama chakzu de odire do tabal ru se migul shu de se wa de nawa se nawa nyong ka rong shi se ta de nawa de ba ti tabal ru da migul shu yo mar ba
no
what and 타니베 시바 작바데디 시나 and 타니베 세마신 누구 제다디 타니디 오마레스.
So among the three conditions to establish something exists conventionally or nominally, if you will, Tanyedu in Tibetan, the first one is something known to conventional consciousness, and that's what we just talked about. But then it's not enough that something is known to conventional consciousness, but that it must not be invalidated by, the Tibetan word is, maybe the way it starts is contradicted by any other conventional valid cognition. Yeah, the second condition has to be met. And the example here is there are a lot of things that may appear to our conventional perceptions or consciousness, but they may not be there in reality. And examples given are the mirage as water, right? The mirage appears to our perception as water, and that's known, like, this looks like there's water, but then we know there is no water, right? Mirage is not water because it is invalidated by or contradicted by other valid cognitions. And similarly, a coiled rope looks like a snake. That appears like a snake. That appears to a conventional consciousness, but in reality, a coiled rope is not a snake, right? That can be verified by other valid cognitions, right? So therefore, mirage as water and the coiled rope as a snake, do not qualify to be conventional existence because they do not fulfill the second conditions. They are invalidated or contradicted or challenged by other valid, conventional valid cognitions.
티코나 츠히지 리베네바 멤버 세야 되르발 티레자 랑이 예메 츠히지 제베 리베네바 멤버바네 타니드 제베 돈남 타니베 세메 조 괴장 Rangi imi suishin di chewe rigbe shibe ni namba tamje di minuba ngeba goje. Rigba ti yoba chubna ni rangu yoba chuba yinbe se ta nyebe tong yinba ngewa yino. Sta ti kona yi suishin di chewe rigbe nyoba mimba se de ini ti kona yi chewe da rigba ti ga ini koli ya kanju ko mewa maado derwa. Ko manuba taga rangli ini never never shagari mother could semi toga yomaris. So Tikona Jiba Rigati in the tiny shoes of the semi tone, Rangin Togora. So the Gavas never never said, because Manu was your resta. What is it? That nurse and come never toss and over. The other did no ministry. She the tiny because Tikona sees you with that only to be Rigijorwa. What you did up Phuntsok Yomara. Yomar is no Pumda, the Kawas, the good nugget and Nugamas. What is it?
No, so. And then the third condition is if, which is on page 178, if reason that accurately analyzes reality, that is, analyzes whether something intrinsically exists, does not contradict it, right? So the third condition is that something that is asserted to exist conventionally must not be contradicted or invalidated by what we call the analytical, if you will, reasoning and wisdom. Okay? So what this really basically means is that there is what we call perception, valid cognitions that deal with conventionalities of things, and that establish the conventional aspects of phenomena or conventional reality. Okay? And there are valid cognitions that deal with the ultimate nature of phenomena, right? How do they actually exist? Those two valid cognitions are different, and they have different jobs, so to speak. Okay? So it is not the job of what we call analytical valid cognition to find out whether something exists conventionally or not. Okay? It's not the job of that valid cognition. Okay? For example, as we talked about this before also, that the wisdom in the state of meditative equipoise on emptiness, shunyata, right? For that wisdom, except emptiness, no conventional phenomenon appears to that wisdom exists, right? But that does not mean that conventional phenomena don't exist at all. Just because this wisdom does not receive the appearances of conventional phenomena and does not perceive conventional phenomena, it does not mean that this wisdom is invalidating or contradicting the conventional reality. You know, it just simply doesn't seize it because it's not its job, right? So that's what we call not being contradicted or invalidated by analytical, reasoning. Just like we use another example, let's say a visual perception of that pillar does not perceive a vase or a pot, but it does not mean that the visual perception of the pillar has invalidated the existence of the pot, because there is another valid perception of the pot, right? Because it has different objects, right? It deals with different objects. So in the same way, analytical valid cognition deals with the ultimate nature of things, whereas conventional valid cognitions deals with conventional reality. So they have different, territories of their own to deal with.
Teacher Rishi Muneba, teacher the Sony, and Tanya the do Joan, the Onju, the Soul, they do Joan. In a union, the men in Zimble, Lodo, get near me, the Onju saw the two. They do give a get, make it, they do give a Royal Second Rigbe Mendoba, Songyang. Rigbe name in number time you the Muzum Shero, said that you know the chairman again. Rishi Karsa, Muneba the Truba ni Tongji She. Rishi Matoba, the Rishi you the kick by Tongji She. What is that? Treasure hit of the Telsa, or said that each other. The Rishi Karsa, Muneba the Karsa, 민노바다 티 트바 이제 송네 제도 다 리기 트바세 제 리기 트바다 제 요마르바
No.
메자다 인 레기네 게디 랑도 강가 에 조다 온주 나히시네 충고마도 제 샤자메라 샤옹거와 그래서 샤자메와 샤옹데 용다 강가 세야데 리기 비게 민노바다 티 트바 니디 소소 마제와 티 종로 되는 숑고레스 제다다 인 조다 온주 다 딱바라서 다 가지 민기 강가 샤니리고 강가다 ine lendi gyurela saba ganzo langdo ge pegeta nyamle ge ganga kharishana otso ganga rigi ge cheba shin mi ba de jigbares
No.
yena ine tiga cheme ne manu ge cheba yores reba onju zo da da ba zo cheme ne go re ganzo le gyurela de nyamle zo cheme ne go maro o tigi cheres
No. So. No. So the problems that we find, in the, we're able to see through this debate is this, that, if someone insists that for something to exist conventionally, it must be findable, right, through analysis. Okay. So then, all that issues come up. Right, that we have to put everything under microscopic analytical analysis to find out what is and what is not, and does it exist or not, right? And only through that verification process we can say something is there or something's not there. Okay, but that's not a requirement for something to exist conventionally, right? Something exists conventionally if it fulfills those three conditions. Okay, and just because analytical valid cognition does not, find something to exist intrinsically, or does not perceive necessary conventional reality. That does not mean that analytical valid perception is invalidating or contradicting or nullifying or avoiding the conventional reality. Okay. So that is the crux of the matter. Just because conventional phenomena are not established by analytical valid cognition, it does not mean analytical valid cognition is like, I don't like you. He didn't say that, right? I'm just like, I'm just kind of, failing all of you or dissatisfying your non-existence. It's not saying that, right? It just simply is not a job. Okay? So the critiques, I think their assumption is that for something to exist, it must be verified by the analytical, valid cognition. Something should be findable if something exists, isn't it? So if that's the case, according to Pasenkyang mathematicians, anything we put under that microscopic analytical examination, nothing is findable. Whether it's a God, or whether it is a universal principle of some kind, or whether it is a karma, good and bad karma, whatever it is, nothing is findable under that analysis. Now, just because nothing is findable under that analysis, if we conclude that nothing exists at all now, then we are really making a big blanket statement, and that doesn't hold water, right? That's not true. Law of karma and outcomes exists, because we experience. We are the ones who are creating all kinds of karma and experience their outcomes. So they do definitely exist. But God as a creator, for example, or the divine principle, right? It doesn't exist because there are no valid cognitions verifying, right, the existence of universal principle and the divine creator.
Deva ngoma na yin deva tumu ma yin be kun de sungzin shame da shame dang da zu da onju la so na za number job de de rang ngo zhe chuo yi mi ri be jin de da je ri be to de yi be sam ni xia ba yin be de da la rang yi mi je shi ba ji ke lang go de to de ri be ji su de de shi de da ne Dodo Oma da the Shami Shiva Keji Shami said, Chirobe da Tagba, the Onjula Soba Dozo, you know any karsa rigbe jesu shin ni go res karsa no kono shagdu zan tang go rigbe jesu shin ni rigbe jesu ke dan shago ro wa se di yon ni go res se da da nganzo tenyo sha dan de jen tang go shagdu ne rigbe jesu shin ma sha tani ji de tani tu sha yin za in ko yo na ni ni jesu shin ni go ma res so this is that
The big difference between the positions of essentialist critics and the Prasangika Madhyamikans is this. The essentialist critics, their whole basic premise and contention is that everything must be findable until ultimate analysis. Okay? So with that kind of a premise, then they started to assert partless particles, partless consciousness, and all of these other things. Right? So from their premise point of view, it is really has a vital that something should be found under ultimate analysis. Otherwise, how do we know they exist or not, isn't it? But for Prasangika Madhyamikans, they said, no, we don't agree with your premise. For us, if something is known to the conventional consciousness, not invalidated by other valid cognitions, and not invalidated by the ultimate analytical cognition, then we say that something exists. We don't need to, put everything under microscopic analytical analysis to say something exists or not. So that's the big difference between essentialist critics and Prasangika Madhyamikans.
That Teta Garza didn't regret Jesus to the vision. Teta Jeva regret maybe. 딱be 코르스바 민중에 대다기 대다 리베 예바네 리베 마이베 킹바 게데 다 유미 유네 리바트다 니고베 셰로세 어디에 다디샤도 주어도 온줄라서버도 콘도 유에스고 에네 디샤미에다 키바게 샤미사 거제다 로타베 거이바데 에네 리바 양다가 따서는 에네 고제 수고 말스 뭐 뉴지 로어로 거다 뭐 디지다다 디샤미에다 치도 기지 샤면 고베 리바시 에네 온줄 딱바다 지도 고야 리바다 남레 페샤 남레 리게오요로 어디에 가도 리바티 에네 땅우데산 에네 고서 에네 이거 뭐 데미 에네 리바티 켑도 레스 콘도다 콘즈 콜야 제바시네 콘 따바나 인도 모두 제오로 어 제데 리베큐도다 이 많이 베인자 고 리바티 켑도 레스 어 대다 연네 리바티 켑고 베셔로 다 수가라서 바데서 에네 Tinte Jebashine, and the Ribati Kills and go Biogomar, Scott Vocal Shagdizan, got tiny some Shire or Dirva. Tavata Shavata in the Tadala, data tiny when they told to a young June, the Jeba in Tiran, water, Yebe Loso, Sheba Kelamba, Membe, Tadala, Yebe, Jeba Charme, told the Rigbe, Jesus de Minde Sheros. What is that? The only last of the Ribes doors. Gandhi Mata Majeva and Picashi Namsha Karim Patti, Tambok and Mata Majeva Shata, and the poor Ribeji Mason and the Comiago Maris. What the Koyun Mindagi that kid the day.
So, from the perspective of essentialist critics, as we just said, that their big premise is that for something to exist, it should be findable under an analytical investigation. Okay? And if something cannot be found under that investigation, then that thing cannot be asserted to be existent. Okay? And so based on that, so they started to propound all these different kinds of if you will, assertions such as there is Chizo, universal principle, or there is the divine, creator, or there is partless particle or partless consciousness, and so forth. Okay. So because their premise is these things exist, this should be findable, right? So now if we, use rational analysis to see whether we can find them or not, if these are not found, and then that reasoning analysis must really invalidate them, their existence, isn't it? Because their assertion, they said it should be findable, right? So if we, now put it under analysis and we use the reasoning, critical assessment, everything, and it's not found, then we say, hello, you said it exists, so now is it, right? So it should really undermine their assertions. But in the case of Prasangika Madhyamikans, that's not the requirement. They said, things exist conventionally according to the worldly perceptions, isn't it? Worldly people do not say, establish something to exist like by analyzing every minutiae details of that thing, like, okay, now I got it, it exists. It just something appears to me, I experience it, it exists. It's verified by my experience, not contradicted by others' experience, there you go, right? And so from that standpoint, there is no need to put things under analytical investigation and something needs to be found. Even if something not found, which is the case, right? Nothing is findable under the analysis, but still this does not mean that analysis and reasoning is invalidating, undermining, or knocking out all that other conventional reality. So, and almost in the middle of page 180, an example is given which reads, for example, if someone claims this is a sheep, it is inappropriate to analyze this claim by asking, is it a horse or is it an elephant? Okay, so what it means is that Prasangika Madhyamikans accept things exist conventionally, including practice of abandoning defilements or cultivating the positive qualities, just the way conventionally things are accepted to exist by the people. Okay? And so that does not involve any ultimate analysis to do that. And whatever people say, that's usually, we go with it, isn't it? And if somebody says, hey, here's a sheep, right? Then we just say, okay, it's a sheep, looks like a sheep, so talks like a sheep, I don't know, walks like a sheep, okay, that's a sheep, right? You're not gonna, are you sure it's a sheep, is it an elephant or what? It is, I don't know, mongoose or something. We're not going to do that, right? And so that's the same thing, that when the Prasangika Madhyamikans do not require conventional existence to be verified by ultimate analysis, if you still tell them, right, that, well, nothing is findable under an analysis, so nothing exists. So this is like calling a sheep a dog, it's inappropriate.
Jigden Toma Meva Jabe Tong Rigbe Neve na Tanya to Meba Maribe Govana Rangu Dota Bata Jigde Rangu Trebe Nada Ngaevan Zebata Kazang Rede Tarigri Vanzeva so Yunam Yimbe Jigdena Kanta Tamji Ome Guzan Menose. That Jigden Tavas, Tava, Tiwa, tell a tiny with 7 minutes, but because I catch you some go. But it's some Mugana that is the way. Tom that Tambodi Mariba said, the Shay Dangzi Zarawa. That didn't have the Gaza was a Kaza Dangzirawa. Tisha. That didn't Kazan dream, but there was so this. No, the Jigden and the rid of Jesus, Sangaman, the Yorsama, Till Salvatore Sumar, who gets in Jivaka. Or the Stizet on the Jigana and it put the amount of tire, the intended the Yamares.
So we are at the bottom of page 180. It is important that for a thing to exist conventionally, it must be known to the conventional consciousness. But something known to the conventional consciousness does not absolutely mean that thing has to exist, right? Because the second condition says whether, what is known to conventional consciousness is invalidated or contradicted by other valid cognitions, right? That second condition has to be taken into account as well. It's very important, right? So there's a lot of things which are known to our worldly conventional consciousness, but, they don't exist. And we have seen some of those examples already. And so here it is connected to, how self of phenomena and self of a person appears to exist to our graspings, but they really don't exist. Okay? Marikpa, where is the mention of ignorance here, it refers to grasping at the self of phenomena, chojita, right? There is no self of phenomena, but it's something appears to exist to our perception, but really it doesn't exist because it's contradicted by other valid cognitions. And the same thing with the self of a person, it appears to our grasping at the self of a person, but it doesn't exist. Okay? And the same thing with, let's say, the mountains, right? And mountains look like permanent to us because we know they have existed here 100 years or millions of years or whatever. So anything that exists a million years looks like a permanent to us, right? What else is it? But that mountain, however hard and rock and stuffy it is, but it is impermanent. So it undergoes momentary disintegration, and one day it will collapse or whatever, it will vanish, right? So it is, mountain as a permanent does not exist because it's invalidated or contradicted by, by the law of impermanence and the valid cognitions dealing with the law of impermanence.
Kaji sujasu dang mudi ki da dakba nam tanyi di yemi mizumbe jide di ngaman jiden da chala kwarsa jiden tamji la chakba da shema chuda ma kona chabi shiru shema wan number ma sheba di shen di na tanyi du suzo yema tabi yemba me gwe la rawi ngo chaba yoga ba yewa so mang la se da dire da jig de ene onjig da then Jizu the Yomari Karsana, they in a Dutama Tarma, the Jigde Yunta Tire Maris. Sugat is any Jigde Yunta Tire, yes. She the Queen Sugata, Jizu, you may kill me that didn't jig in Slavina. And they take Maris. In the moment she was in the church, they don't Yamata was say, and any Ranshi may say to Jigde Tire Marva. She said, Tibata, any they don't Yamata with Ranshi Mara with the Ganga. Yomar is lago cigarettes, the Jidin charge your mother, Dutama, Charma, the Jidin charge your mother. Said that, tell you, we change you to Mambosita, never lago. You mother was in a don't you make your mother. What I could you repeat your ganga, you mother was saying in the wrong water. This is what it. You mother will make of it. Wrong water by you, wrong water, I didn't Jidin charge. Wrong mother didn't Jidin charge your mother. But this is museum on $1 that it never take those.
That again in the chick Yabushkomaserva, the Kasagora again, Dirwa.
This was Kazakhstan in a Tanda only so that Chizu that in a Sudat you may in a Tungo Chidan Jibara, you may Mizumo Jiden Karesena. Sudat in the Jide, you want to have that you by Shagres. Chizu. The children to Ganga Tamara, any Meva Shagres, Tamanu Shagua, Tamanu Shai in Omabe, in a Dendo Jimata was there, the Rangi Meba said to the Rangi Yivat Yuguris, Rangi Yivat the Ganga Tar sugar was, Jimata with Tar somewhere was. Said that Chetan Rangi Yavashi, Jimata with my Nuji Mambo do that. So bottom page 180, top of page 181. And so some critics, here, they are trying to differentiate between these two things. Things which are known to some philosophical schools of thought or standpoint, like we said there's Ishwar, right? The creator Ishwar is there. Or there's the Chizo, universal principle, right, according to that school. And then there are things like a form, sound, smell, all the things, right, that exist. He says there's a difference between these two things. According to them, form, sound, smells exist, okay, because these are known to almost all the people or majority of the people, right? The number speaks here, this accounts. Whereas they said Ishwar
as a creator or the universal principle Chizo, right? They said, well, these things don't exist. This only exists for those people who subscribe to those philosophy, right? But most of the people don't accept those things. So they said there's a difference between those things, right? Majority wins the game. That's their standpoint, right? Now Prasangikas are debating with them. You know what? I mean, you can't use the number to, right, and make that kind of a big fuss about things you're here, right? And then, in which case, then they said, most of the people, for us, the way we experience phenomena things is like they are truly existent, right? Intrinsically existent. So that means we win, right? We are the number, isn't it? But in reality, right, nothing exists intrinsically and truly, right? And those who have really realized the emptiness of true existence are far and few here, right? So they have no number to count. So that means they got it wrong and we got it right. And so the number, I think, is not working. Moreover, in the Prasangika system, as we said, a lot of things like we talk about how phenomena are like an illusion, right? Not all of us experience that phenomena are like an illusion. That's only known to maybe few, right? Or that there's experience of non-dual bliss and voidness, emptiness, right? But it exists, but it's not known to, right? Every Tom and Sally, right? So therefore we said it doesn't exist. That doesn't work. So the number thing that critics bring up is not working from Prasangika's point of view.
Rigpa tujiben jewalin dawe jewaro rigpa tujiben jewale de tia sinjelo ni dewala sawa de zemba kayemba de kunzo de dangni da ter kunzo de dangni ter ngobo ti number mine pa imba ni ki chero sinje malo pa ni dungela ni de zemba de ngobo ti kunzo de dangni ter yoba ni ki chero she takso she bo ene jigden tumu de cha jang ter zeba kunzo shinjolo di shela medaso shivodi jidin la marja chang te zeba shinje molba songso so ta yuzen de resha ganje ngando tande deyi na ene khaza terwa karada changde tagda hise ajorwa jigden del da ene dungel dewazi metawal takban zindi gorwa oti jigden chaya de chaya de shena ene 상대 따다 신지마 이 신지로 송샤 스티바 다 리버스 좀 좋아할 근데 뭐다 동에 시어디 지는 사요 뭐데 디 신지 뭐가 송샤 다디 공장으로 왔더니 뭐뉴 시와 밑에 공주
So on top of page 181 there is a quote passage quoted from Chandrakirti's commentary on Arya Nagarjuna's 60 stanzas of reasoning. So which basically substantiates this point that we cannot assert something exists going by the majority's viewpoint and something doesn't exist only because few people knows it or something. That logic is not working. So that in a quote is to substantiate the point. In Buddhism, as we know, then we talk about different types of misconceptions. There are the 4 basic misconceptions. It's called Sangte Takdashi, right? Something that is not pure as being pure, right? We see that. And something that is impermanent as permanent. Okay? Something that is devoid of self as having self. And something that is not real happiness as something happiness, right? So we have those misconceptions. What appears to us are the misconceptions, but what exists in reality are not known to most of us, isn't it? What is it? The impermanence, selflessness, the purity, and the bliss or the happiness, right? These things exist, but these things are not known to majority of the people. Yeah. So now do we say that these things don't exist at all? So that logic is not working.
가지 그런 데반는 이지나 상대 따다 힘좀버티 진짜 몰라 버세. 또 당미 미다 등을 또 당미 히디 진짜 로샤고 그러. 다 다셔 진짜 그러. 또 티기로.
Because if you go by the critic's position or the premise, then they have to say that what is known to the majority of the people must be the correct assertions or the perceptions or the views, isn't it? So that means, those 4 things we talked about, self, existence, permanence, and the impurity, and the happiness or the bliss, those things, perceptions of those things must be correct perceptions, right, according to their premise. But from the Buddhism point of view, those things are incorrect, distorted perceptions, isn't it? As a matter of fact, the opposite of those things are the correct perceptions, which are not known to majority of the people.
This is Loba songs did the Pumbo Medasos and Zimbi, Tobani, no you true young, and true young, even in that semi never may have changed Maloba, Madua Shala, only Shivanana, no you true you. Madua Shakin and maybe Madua she may show. Anginam la young, Truba dying. Jideva or now the Jesus Timbi, Ton Yeva de Maybe going. Sunyin son na angi nam lokpe gunzo yin la tele xenbe angi neme nam yangda gunzo yin no sta tim da kharsa phungbo theda phungbo takso nzembe tokpa tse mita so ro mita so nzinge te eni ko phungbo mita ba da eni kar saji de dongwa di xinul ma du yin za eni ko ma du on de shagre so da nang le tokpa nang chu cha ro
ala
ko ten Chimil Madu race. The only to in Karina thing, so you only that Kartiri Karsa. Ganga Trishi show that country only in the Trishi and Bichasi or the Tigulo, Trishi and Bichasi. She had a go that the Yaga de Karsa. Young, to Kato Madusa, the Kato de El Madusa. Jidange Kevin do the number in shower, the Yongzong only sing to the chat on the tribute cast still over that country. What he gets it is that she the Madrid Shah here may be it called Madrid Sigma race. That dinner Madrid Sigma de Shina only Ganga Jigma race. Only now the trip and dying. Can you now a trip at the Jigma Shina and Jigdam or Jesus tribute to you about the Maybe going in the young old joke race. What happened? Sunyada, Milan, only to any Lopasha. One bought the several now to any young Shagrava or the Shagres. Now you trip at the Chibari, the Shina, that the wrong thing to be tribute in the tribute on Shago Marva or Diggins.
Electrician, but not in that they get wrong senior tribute.
Oh, is that quite tree in a only Kaye in the young dog on the Kayi, Lovakunda Shagra.
No.
Milana say that today, Lovakunda Sha, one bought several doors of gun to Chitanga Yongza Jiganga, any young dog with a shower. She didn't go now on a year lover.
No. So we are on page 181 in the middle. So what is described in this? A couple of things. Number one, all the conceptual perceptions, in Tibetan we call it tokpa or conceptions, right? Conceptual perceptions are considered as perceptions which are mistaken with regard to their appearing objects. Okay? A conceptual perception of a form, right, pertaining to how the form, pertaining to its appearing object, nangyul in Tibetan, it is mistaken, but it still perceives the form correctly. Okay? So it is a correct perception because it is ascertaining its main focal object correctly, although it is mistaken with regard to its appearing object. Right? Because the whole definition of a conceptual thought or perception is a perception that which is mistaken to its appearing object. Okay. So we can talk about conceptual perception of impermanence. It's mistaken in one sense to its appearing object, but it's unmistaken because it perceives the impermanence right correctly. According to Prasangika Madhyamikins, all the sensory perceptions or consciousnesses, wangshe in Tibetan, are mistaken perceptions. According to Prasangika Madhyamikins, all the sensory perceptions are mistaken perceptions. But then within these sensory perceptions, there are differences as well. Some are considered as what we call, what I always struggle to translate this in English, the Lokpe Gunzo deceptive conventional phenomena or the false conventionality. Remember, always I struggle with that. And the Yangda Kunzok, which is the correct conventionality or the true or false in that sense. Yeah. Although the sensory perceptions are mistaken according to Prasangikas, but some of the sensory perceptions are what we call false conventional reality. Lokpe Kunzok in Tibetan. So go with the Tibetan word. Lokpa means incorrect, false, and the examples given are that of, let's say, reflection of a face in the mirror, right? And so our sensory perceptions, right, to that, the reflection in the face, reflection of a face in the mirror appears as a real face, but worldly people know it's not the real face, isn't it? So that's a sensory perception which is mistaken, but it is incorrect or false conventionality or something like that. And the same thing with the snow mountain appearing as blue or yellow, whatever rainbow color, right, or that is the same category. Now, whereas colors like yellow appearing as yellow, perceived as yellow, or blue perceived as blue, so that sensory perception is also mistaken perception, but it is considered as a correct, right, conventionality by the world. Okay, are you with me? So within the sensory perceptions, although these are all considered as mistaken from Prasangika point of view, but there is that kind of a category or division, differentiations exist.
풍부 딱발라서 집에 똑변 진다 유는 탄에 대한 매외 고바 뉴에 메다바서 집에 유시네 유는 탄에 대해 여바 리베 가바 미니소 동담바라마 랑고 저베 딱서 시 미세베 제디 디니스 저베 에네 메타베 미세베 데코날데니 디제 여바르 제바 라 신제 로마로기 카테 나이 신제 로마가 나에 메발라 고네 나에 메발라 고네 속다메다 데두당 세 예메 칸라 저네나 체마를 제바 송소사 다들 가서 근데 네이가 다 체주 시요라와 그 체주 시와야 되네 딱 동네 딱 반세 발다가 시대에네 데레스 가서 당해돼요 말이스 메타반지게 시버디 유데 당해돼요 레스 그래서 거기 지금 말이스 이 가니고 말이다 딱 받아 나 주바 딱 받아 다 시절로 시버디 가토로 와 시절 뭐 시버디 가요 말와 어디세 디레스 지다 당해진 디레스 다 동답에 온 데시나 에네 딱서 시어티 시절에 미세바 나시 에네 메타보다 동어라 서버테 동답바시나 에네 코니 유미 쳐봐요 뭐 직발해라 티치바송다 아니 시진도레는 소울 전에 그 세마를 지어도 세야지다 도이나 들어요 말에 어디 디스고 그랬다 근데 덴바지는 퀄리티게 소울 좀스거나 인 세마를 지어야 지고레스 어디 지고 So at the bottom of page 181, so the objects of those four misconceptions we identified, something that's impermanent as being permanent, something that is impure as being pure, something that is suffering as being blissful, something that is selfless as being, having self. Those objects do not exist, and those perceptions are distorted perceptions, isn't it? Those perceptions are distorted perceptions. So therefore, when we, how should I say, through reasoning, through analysis, we can find that those are distorted perceptions. So once we realize that those distorted perceptions will cease to exist, or they can be eliminated, right? Whereas the opposite of those distorted perceptions, the four, right, are the correct perception. Seeing that which is impermanent as impermanent, right, and all of that are the correct perceptions, and you cannot, how should I say, get rid of correct perceptions. Okay, so that's how conventionally, from conventional point of view, right, distorted perceptions can be illuminated, corrected, whatever, but the correct perceptions cannot be undone or abandoned or something like that.
But from ultimate point of view, Döntambar in Tibetan, right? Both the distorted perceptions and the correct perceptions, right, do not exist intrinsically. So, in the light of ultimate truth, distorted perceptions and undistorted perceptions are just the same. Okay. So what this means is, in other words, as Geshe explained, that we as people, as we engage with the objects, whatever the objects are, form, sound, smell, if we engage in them, perceiving them or as intrinsically existent, then our perceptions are characterized by what we call the true signs, isn't it? In other words, our perceptions are characterized by the notion of true existence. So that's called marked by the sign, true.
Jugbali Demuranshi de Jukunzo, Tegonshima Deva, Gunzo di Tebati song the Seto, and Gunzo Deva said the Denzing de Demashagoras. Said the Gunzo de Demuranshi de Jukunzo, the Tegonshima Deva, the Gunzo di Tebati song the Seto, in the Demba song to us, and Timares. He is on this Sudazo, Maribio Gunzo, Demba Jova song be Chero, he and Joe made Suda Gunzo, Demba Job, Demba Sabian. Sugdala so what Gunzo Demba is Demba is the Gubu needs to let Demba may share. In lowing will Demba Shawara, the long with Deva, Denzing will shower. Don't you double Deva Shamarva? So Denzing will Deva Shawata Remaja, Cochisanko, Tanya, she the Demba in Shell, Tonda Mares. Denzing will Demba Shawa some race. T. Sabiang, any Karsa, road Debe more Demba in the dinner or Timida. You made the Sujazo Guzo Dembaja with Demba and Sabiangi, Demba in La Samba, Denzin La Shagwe, Roshi Drote with Marive, more Demba in it. Then Nimuji, Nimu, or that they shall do that. Because dance at the Denzin will dance with Mother, and Chitangi, Demba to be dancing at the Sumas. The cousins and this were Tanda and the Denzi you'd see young Denzi you Demba Shah, Tiny with Rebecca, tiny but much of it, and Rebecca Yomar Laura. The Kaya maybe gay to us. Tiny with dance at Denzing will never shower us. Denzing will never in Denzil here, and tiny but the go serious. Tiny devils at Denzing will shower. I said, Denzi, you go in a tiny deba and go to us. Did Deba say the Denzing will Demba in some and it could not Demba Sharma. Tiny shoot the Deba in Bizema race, the Goyomara. That Deba in the Dinzi Shinuka, any tiny shoot the Magana and Gavasha. That tiny shoot is the Gunza Deba said the car is Dinzi will Demba Demba is Larmo. She don't go Deba in Sena. Deba Maris. So there was the Coca Zumbarava. The Kaja Karika. The butter was in that. It was a thick over me.
So on top of page 182, a qualm has been raised and based upon a passage quoted from Chandrakirti's commentary on the middle way. Queens of Temba, Samvriti Satya, which we translate in English as conventional truth or reality. Okay. And so from what perspective do we posit conventional truth or Samvriti Satya, Queens of Temba, right? That's the question. And something is considered as, in some sense, conventional, that label, the conventional truth, or maybe the deceptive might work better in this case, a truth. That truth is posited from the point of view of grasping at true existence. Okay, grasping at true existence. Because conventional reality, as we said, is not established from the analytical wisdom point of view, right? It's established from conventional point of view. And so something is considered as conventional truth in a sense, for that grasping at the ignorance of grasping at true existence. Okay? So that is the point. So now the critics say, well, if that is the case, grasping at true existence, that ignorance, right, is a distorted one, right? So our whole goal is to be able to eliminate that ignorance. So by refuting it is a referent object, that means there is no true existence, and by eliminating that ignorance, then aren't we saying that conventional truth does not exist at all, right? We are also, right, invalidating the conventional reality. So that's the qualm being raised. So according to Prasangika, they said, no, we are not necessarily saying that conventional truth is necessarily a truth per se. We are simply saying that label conventional truth is posited from the ignorance of grasping at true existence. Okay? So, for example, all the conventional realities, form, sound, smell, they are conventional reality, from the point of that ignorance. But we are not necessarily saying they are true in the sense of, how we say nothing is truly existent. We are not saying that. Okay, that's what the Prasangika is saying. So, being simply labeled as a truth must not be taken to mean something exists truly, right? They don't exist truly, but they are called truth from the ignorance of grasping itself. So Geshe would like to stop there and yield to you for questions, clarifications. Let me note down this page number. Yeah, somebody should start and then we will get it. Yeah.
So I don't know if I'm understanding correctly about the difference between the conceptual perceptions and the sensory consciousnesses. How they? Is it the case that conceptual perceptions are both mistaken and non-mistaken, simultaneously mistaken and non-mistaken, whereas sensory consciousness they're only mistaken, or as it put it,
okay,
they don't have the factor of being non-mistaken.
Okay.
And what is the reason for that? Is because the conceptual conscious perceptions have both appearing and conceived object.
Okay.
Whereas the sensory don't have the conceived.
Okay, sure. Well, I can show the issue again. That and that the talk about in a chishe in the Kabbalah Wagga, Rang Nine Lutuber there, Rangi, that Jugula Madiver Wagga, the Sumberwa, Koya Chitikala. And I talk by Shabbat the Chubaya, Mativa, Niga in the game Muraves or Wagga, to watch it Wagga. The one shade they get the Kanga, the Castle, tangible or Chishe in the Kabbalah Wagga. The call Madivi Chalago or Wagga. City and Casata, deal that and the Benediga, Togu Yomar, one shade again. The Kabbalah said the Carres, I did a shake your answer. Talk about the get the Kanga Chishe in Madivi Shabbat, Niga, the Yaming or Wagga. And one shade they get a Kanga Chuba in the Kabbalah Wagga. Oh, the session now.
This is your touch. Talk by Madu in the Lagomar, talk by just a tree there. The Koran begins Zinda will true or Madama Concept. That kind of Thomas said the kind of Sensu said when the Chejo of Mambo in the tin, the Chejo chicken in my Gaga bed depth in Jew or Marava. Or tea shiny and of course tribute to Shashadua. That only said the Sensu said that you move number there to enjoy in the you could near zero Gaga, you and the Ganga called Nango. But it not done. In the tree, the tree Maris Shashia Mel Shashi, who you number David or Shumura.
No.
Talk about the super daughter and your country.
No.
That only if is Carsa, you see number David or Pajo Motoko, usually men only Tia Yomara. Talk about the Yugomara, you know, make some the Naji to Karshina, the Kazik, some of the other. What each of you, but no, you were in the same the Dumsuk Yomare. 도박은 좀 생중이 차로.
진짜로
그래서 유사기 시험 주스로.
라옹
어이도 좀 주서 자기 쉬고 말아.
라네
제가 유 건강으로 남바대인데 지금 때요다. 그 디너 자기 본다. 소저나이나 소메다바 소시바세야로 가도 이게 강가 냅지 그도 강게 어이 남바대로 그도 지자체는 지야 샤로 말아. 또 봐야는 그 소부제도 소코나 샤그리 뭐 소부다서한테 올샹 말아.
라네
어떻게 이 자기 시야도.
다자게 똑바데다게 나유라라 튜베나네 튜셰샤고 와게 그냥 주유라 마디베차네 마디베샤바세다 니가 임바로 차고 말아서 튜셰이
마디베시나 데스고다 랑도도 시나 에네 튜셰이 또바 튜이 차다 도 말아 지버로
마디베샤바
이나 주힐 주고 뭐다 주힐 주고 뭐
다 랑도는 튜셰이 베캬스이네 다 마디베샤바 세그말 와게디 타니에 지금 말아
마디베샤바 세그말에
어서
지도 마디베샤바 세그말에다 그래서 마주 취시스 무자오스도 되면로 그런 너희도 취시면도 지 이거做了 취미에서 인디 취시도 하고만 지금도
알아놓 I try to make sure that I get the distinctions clearly. In the Buddhist texts, when we talk about Tokpa, conceptual perceptions, they are regarded as mistaken perceptions, but there is no label called, they are both mistaken and unmistaken at the same time. You know, that because they are considered as mistaken with regard to their appearing object, the generic image, right? But they are not mistaken with regard to their main object because they correctly perceive it. But they are not labeled as both mistaken and unmistaken at the same time. The distinction between conceptual perception and the sensory perception is conceptual perception engages its object through its generic image, isn't it? And it's also very discriminative in a sense that it can pick and choose certain aspect of the object and just focus on that. It doesn't take the whole composite image or the aspect of the object per se. If you have like a conceptual perception of form, it just zooms on the form, but it doesn't necessarily focus on the impermanence or some other aspects. You know, it's very, in that sense, discriminatory. We call it seljuk. You know, it just picks and chooses and selective. Yeah, that's called selective is the right word, I think. Whereas the sensory perceptions are very direct. Okay? And the way they receive their object is the whole composite aspect of its object, right? In the case of a form, you know, form appears, its impermanence appears, its products appear, right? It is not selective in a sense. So if it's mistaken to one of those, it's mistaken to the whole thing because the whole composite, right? And that's the kind of a difference between the two what we call types of perceptions. Yeah, that's it.
Understanding here is that the sensory consciousnesses are always mistaken.
Right.
Whereas I'm quoting here from the text, I don't know if the translation, but it says that the conceptual perceptions have a factor of being non-mistaken. Whereas the sensory consciousnesses don't have that factor; they're always mistaken.
Right. I think that disagree that and the shung dene sebinar wage tokba del ya triwe chada ma riwe chaji or so wage that the one she del triwe chada ma riwe chashi ayo mar so wage that the juyu da na yu ke jita ra chagor wage triwe chase da
triwe chase disorder karza onji na ene yu jing cha be de su de jing tri so de su me da ba de gang ga ling cha zang tri so wa to ba ene ko na yang ben de pong ji to ba de na分别统计的分别哪样子个哪样的区域嘛都，在就医生那的，我觉得有做分别区域嘛啦，我个区域的差些的哇，现在我现在有区域的差些要嘛的，就区的区域，毛主那刚刚的毛主哇，我的开始是个有的那把地都一下是吧，一下子这个有的千万刚刚那把都这个些的。다 그 될 줄이 될 줄을 채트고 그것도 있대요 그러나
다이나 단단하게 모티베이션 완전 열고 말어 다
모티베이션 요소 말이 지금 주의에 돼 차려
That's right. What it means is that conceptual perceptions have a factor of being correct. It's because we can how to say distinguish between, as we have done, that a conceptual perception of whatever right, object, it has a factor element that is mistaken with regard to its appearing object, right? Whereas it has another factor that's not mistaken because pertaining to its main object, it correctly perceives it. So we can make the distinction. Whereas in the case of sensory perceptions, we cannot make those distinctions if sensory perceptions are, mistaken in all aspects, in that sense, right? Yeah.
lovely girl, do I? Because only the modu share here, maybe say, do I?
No, sir.
But the only you still but the Pumba to the Pumba, because you call no, you don't choose the war. That Pundu what they are going to Pumba Tonji Pumba, but the true Pumba true like what?
No, sir.
What is so? So
it's just like say in the case of sensory perception, if it's mistaken in regard to a vase, let's say, right, then it's mistaken to its color, it's mistaken to its maybe form, size, whatever it is, right? We cannot differentiate. That's what it's saying. In the case of conceptual perception of a vase, the generic image of the vase appears as a vase. That's why it's mistaken, but still correctly processing the vase as a main object. So it is correct in that sense. So we can make the distinction, right?
But once again, the point is that sensory conceptions are always always mistaken. So because the way it was just explained is if a sensory conception is mistaken with regards to its object, a vase, that implies that it might not be mistaken. The way it was just explained. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I'll say.
But actually, it's always mistaken.
Right. One shake share, but the cut in a could choose in, but was get 2 more to share.
Oh, you treat in there's a
one shake.
That this is wrong. That thing you treat share.
No.
Then the wrong you mean the 2 more to share your one. You're the chair to the what is your dog. Musumina on any charging to the Ganga tribute charge. Charging Madu Gagal Madu chaps.
I don't give it
or you mean it Ganga, they were the word.
I am too much initial. Too much initial.
Then the Shidon doing it to the inner Musum Ongu Madu Shagora. The Madu, I think, Chatamji Madu Shagata. Chidon don't get over here 3 years and Chatamji 3 years Shagara. Only you to know you want to say and indicate a humor. What is it?
Yeah, don't you mention it to a tree become
I changed the mother in my regime. Don't buy any. No, you want to say, I guess your mother. What you get as well, you say.
I don't know. Send a you big one in Trisha and Caballing Gilmore. Yes, according to Prasangika perspective, right, the sensory perceptions are always mistaken. Right, there's no if and but here. But Geshe also kind of, said according to Sevatantika Madhyamika in some of the schools below, then they make a distinction how if sensory perceptions are mistaken, it's mistaken to all of its aspects of its object. But if it's not mistaken, it's not mistaken. So they make those distinctions, right? Yes, any other thoughts? Yeah. Maybe one. Yeah. Could you give?
Saying something because now it sounds like we're saying something different than we said a couple of weeks ago with the terms of the sensory perception. I thought we said that it's correct to when you see something, what you perceive, what you see it, that's correct. But the realness of it or the intrinsic, that's the incorrect part. But now we're not making that distinction, and I'm not really sure what's going on anymore.
Sure, I'll ask. Tinjuberg Lulia, one shade get Trisha and Cabalan Wagon. They let the Kazangema and so Kamaj Nam did the Koran did the Petrux on Sarwagan. Kazangema Sidu Kanla, and another one shade dig the Dakar Sourcan. You did Temper to one now with Chala Tuber Wagon, and you the Togo your slabber wagon. Takochi Trisha Jeda Madusa Chishawa. That didn't sound about Trisha that the pet Carsora. This is also quite Chazan loss on this station now.
This is your dark Karsa. Kido, only you to do Kitty 마주 차 추모지 차샤고도 쓰고
가장님만 왕지 가서 랑 신인 좀 나면 차라 추버 레서 봐 먼저 와게 이네 거 유도돼요 와 가장 된데 샤다지 추모지 셰버 와게 야와체버서 저러 와 드린 베트 왕셰 이네 베트 차버스 라버 와게 지디 다 베트 돈다 로 등을 쳐서
알레 추버스 다다데 텐교로 쓰고 당해로 추비 차셔야 돼
라 어디 와서 이네 다체다 디 고아데 따라 되게 뭐 와. 다디 텐교로 추버 라야 되다 가장 라야 니데 야와체고 뭐 이렇게
알레 대세고 다 대교로 유일 추나라 유도서로
라래
다 로지메 유일 추나 또야요 뭐 어디 쳐가지고 다 그지
다체다 텐교부기 단데게 추버 이네 또그 디 대세다 가장 랑제 조벌나 월 추버에 유도서 디 켜바시kin 치고 모르게
다 그래서
I'm trying to say if there are different schools of thought, can you differentiate? Otherwise, it's all luck now, right?
어디서 그래서 다 대교 랑제 저번나 다가 추시셔고로
라네,
다 로지메 랑제 저번나 데 추시셔고 말아
라네,
추야 시다 갑도 추야 뭐도 지
라네,
랑제 저한테 또 동대셔고 뭐 추시고 말아
라네.
어디 그 추모를 해봐야 돼 되게 좀 거다
그래서 대교-
대교에 언신 로이는 지다 먼저서 요로는 추시셔로
라네,
랑제 저번나 셔로
라네,
어디 언신라 셔고
라네.
다 로지메 데 랑우 저한테 그런 거 보는데도 요다 그 랑우 저번나 그 추시셔고 말아
라로.
그 갑도 그런 노는 추도 추를 뭐도 랑우 저사 추시셔고 말아
라네. 다단다디 가서 텐주버기게 왕셰의 추셰메 캡사데 랑을 두번 나베 나베 추셰 인스와.
어디 쳐봐
이네 추셰레데 거 가서 유토서고로 봐.
어디도 네
라.
추시 리유도서
Right. I mean, this is where, according to Pasangikas, one of the unique positions is perceptions can be mistaken, but they can also be valid, right? Which seems like contradictory, right? So that it seems like, in the sense that things appear to our perceptions as intrinsically existent, and so it's mistaken to that because things don't exist intrinsically. But still, our sensory perceptions can validly perceive, things. So that's the Prasangika's position. Right? Things can, what's what we said? They are mistaken. All the sensory perceptions mistaken with regard to how things appear in things existence, but they could also be valid perceptions. Right? Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And this has some. Right. Right. Yeah. Thank you. Any other? Okay, if not, one more. And then I have a lot of announcements and prayer. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
Many books translated into Buddhism. So we read the different things. They say different things. So we read a little bit of here, a little bit of there, bada bing, bada bong, and we get confused. And I came across a statement by Jangche Ropé Dorje.
Where is that page?
No.
Oh, no, in
it's
somewhere else.
elsewhere.
Okay, yeah.
It says, living this vivid appearance where it is where it is, they search for something protruding to refute. I'm quoting from my notes, not from my memory.
Okay.
Or anybody else's memory for that matter. But the meaning of this, okay, I'm sure Geshe is familiar with that. The meaning of this is explained as the object of negation is the object itself, as it vividly appears to the sense and to the mind. And it's not an appendage. It's not something else. Meaning that the object of negation is this body. Everything that we see, this is what the object of negation is. Not. He seems to be saying that.
I see.
So again, living this vivid appearance where it is, they search for something protruding to refute, which is a mistake. Where does Geshe come?
So your question is, it seems like
according to him, the object negation, yes, the object negation is everything that appears to the senses and to the mind.
Okay.
With everything.
Right. So the question is, if we negate everything, then what is right?
Yeah. I mean, where does he stand on this particular?
Okay, sure,
does he understand it in the same way?
Sure. I got it. Yeah. 可能根据这修过了，但可能对吧？张家瑞贝的这个使用起给农场个多啊，但因为呢，可能给的也不得讲嘛，像张家瑞贝的这个原因的使用的是有点啥，但张家瑞贝的这个当按照搞说搞这大我真的晓得话个， They also they do call gaje da they the tamje 가르 유제 tamje 와게
아래
안에 가제 다 루징에 체샤사 와게
아래
안디 겐게 기시디 차비시유나 디겐 공주 가르 연나서 와게 딱 유제 탐제 가제 다 이나 와게 다 유제 탐제 근데 가제 다 가서 유제 탐제 가루 와게
아래
안디 근데 이나 사게
장제르데 요새 다시 가서 다 애들 사야 자지다 되게 신경 리직도 요 장제르데 쓰기지 말이
노서
그래서 먼저 그래서 수주주로 로 통도 shago도
노서
그다 로 숨샤이 봐
노
내가 되버 딩게지
노
데미 키와 딩게지 강에 키와 마시 봐 딩게 숨샤이로
노
다 가가 나세 가가 러이 저 나에 가자 디 가제 다 나세 가가 가제 다 야야나 타지 야사 샤가라 마라
할로
로디 나세 가가 딘지 차로로다
나래
디 나세 가가 딘지 차마디 그지 현자르비도 가래 아마 문제 나라 유저 가도 되지
Is that from recognizing the face of the mother, or the text you're quoting from Changyur Rubedoje? Yeah, and they have come also sagane in shung.
할래 다지 아마 문제 사지 다 문제 자리야
Tagu namang 문제나.
또 저기 아마 문제 사지도
No, so.
어디 다 갔다 되는 라서 가지 라제 희생도 쓰게 사지 계제 가지 저기와 뉴스 미디어 말에 다들 특징에서도 되게 좋아도 다다 디지가도 그래서 좀만 딘 좋아하시는 거래. 좀만 인바라 그죠? 이거 다 특징에서는 승대 가가지고 더셔. 제가 디차디 디좋아지고 돼야도.
컨데스. 단다디 장저 루베도 아마 문제나.
저제 아마 문제 좋아지 좀만 제도.
어디나 그러스게.
디나나 페이지 나와 리닝 자도 샤세르마도지 나제 가가 가제다이 라요 말다. 가자 나와 리닝 세드당 기존에 가서 해야돼. 가제 비게
추어 가봤대나 나와.
추어 가래도 코로나 링링 좀 속도 없지 뭐지. 때는 집에 나와지야 요 말어 와.
알아. 어디 가고래.
디 링링도 가고.
알아.
디모도 요새 가서 가.
No. So Geshe is not sure which passage you're quoting from, but he remembers that Changyur Rubedoje has this poetic expression called Amang Munjin, recognizing one's mother. And it is in a very poetic form expression, not true, it's a short one piece, and then the comment is written by it. So because anything written poetic, then sometimes people can interpret in many different ways. But in the commentary on that by Jumipam, it says, and if we go by that, Changyur Rubedoje is not saying that the object of negation is everywhere. Right? Everything is object of negation. He's not saying that. What he's saying is that on everything that exists, we get the sense of that fixed, right, entity, like object of negation. And it looks like everything we can look at it looks like it has a fixed entity. So he said that's the object of negation we need to get rid of. He's not saying we should, right? So that may be the true case, right? Yeah. Okay, thank you. And I have a prayer request and a lot of announcements to make. Again, this is New Dang Nguyen Ti Lu Bao Sarwage. That is some ju chong sha again. I have a prayer request for I hope I'm pronouncing the name, if not New Dang Nguyen Ti Lu Bao, who died on May 30. So please pray for this deceased person and others. And then I have a bunch of announcements to make later. Chadong Golun Yube, Yabodon, Chano Keva Sambu, Sanje Don, Hala Kandu, Tela, Tetomba, Zoma Chere, Sala, Chanzin, Omane Beme, 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 Omane Beme. Omane Beme Hore, Gawadi, Yododa, Chere, Sevan, Rujune, Doa, Chiyaman, De Salam, Show. Couple of announcements to make. The first one is on June 11th, that whole weekend we have a Nyungne retreat, fasting retreat of Arya Avalokiteshvara. So it starts on Saturday, June 11, 5:30 in the morning, goes till about 5, and the same schedule for Sunday, and then Monday, June 13, morning 5:30 to 8:30, and then that's the conclusion session, and then you can go to work. And so as we said, those who have received 1,000 armed Avalokiteshvara initiation or 4 armed or any of the high Shokatantric initiations you can participate in this Nyungne retreat. Yeah, so the next weekend we don't have teaching, we have a Nyungne retreat. Announcement number 1. Announcement number 2, the great news is His Holiness the Dalai Lama will be here soon, as you know. And I think he has some events at Vietnamese temple. And so that is on June 18 and 19. So again, that Sunday we cannot have teaching because His Holiness is in town and he's right here giving teaching, so probably won't go that. So no teaching for a couple of weeks. And announcement number 3, on July 10th, GSTDL will celebrate His Holiness' 81st birthday at El Dorado Park. So that's July 10 is again Sunday, 11 to 4. There's a flyer somewhere out there in the lobby. So that's so our teaching will resume on July 3rd. July 3rd must be Sunday, I'm assuming, because I got 3rd, right? And so July 10th will be birthday celebration, no teaching, but July 3rd we will resume the teaching. So next will be Nyungne, and then His Holiness visit, and then July 3rd we resume our Sunday teaching, and July 10th we have the birthday celebration. And for the rest of the talk schedule, everything stays same. Okay, so those who have talk commitment for Gala Chakra, we will do the same. And did I miss anything? Okay, that's it. Did again, I didn't tell him, so he didn't know what I was saying. That again, Tunda Shuma de again, Yung Ne Roa again. And they should continue to Yunang the Wage. That Tunda Nis is on the Sung Mebre. And in the Timbe, there is Sumla Yang Sung Usu. And there is Julia Kundi Chunga Tangdo again, Sung Mebre in the inside.
I'll tell you, Julia,
June 24, Ale. Madam, June 24, and it's no teaching, yeah. So, okay, maybe I should take the opportunity to say it. Because not that I want to say this and make myself important for some kind, I don't like the importance of being an earnest or something, that was a terrible thing. The reason is that, I will be volunteering in India for about a month or so. So we were figuring out what to do, like during my absence, all the arrangements, we explored everything else. So usually I don't know those things. I'm just a translator here. That's how I'm happy. I don't get involved in other things. So he's the most eminent Thebur Rinpoche, many of you know. So we requested him if he could substitute me for the July, 4 Sundays, right? And so he said he's available only in the July. So he will be here to translate. So that's why we have July 3rd. So we couldn't do 24th because I will be in Delhi somewhere. So you have a break, probably you could appreciate a break here and there. So that's the situation. Kange Lode, Timye, Tinde, Ninda, Namda, Rapseve, Chinye, Dungun, Geshe, Seche, Nije, Dowa, Lebande, Kanda, Sebe, Zara, Mendo, Dunge, Geseve, Dozo, Kola, Boje, Daze, Yala, Tuju, Yan. Roda, Jero, Nyumo, Nyelo, Leje, Charo, Cheze, Maria, Muse, Dunge, Radena, Dune, Daje, Saju, Daze, Yende, Lenzo, Jeze, Tuvu, Chura, Juda, Juni, Jambe, Yala, Du, Omara, Bazana, Senden Gyeltsen Gyera Wese Gyen Dalu Temo Memba Rapsene Kada Tenje Shunglu Do Lode Bawe Nawa Zedo Su Lode Gyatsu Udun Bega Je Gesan Pongwe Chudo Mem Tenban Zenla Wando Ji Tanyen Shogun Jola So Wande. Obeisance to my Guru and Protector Manjushri, who holds at his heart a scriptural text, symbolic of his seeing all things as they are, whose intelligence shines forth as the sun, unclouded by delusions or traces of ignorance, who teaches in 60 ways with the loving compassion of Father for his only Son, all creatures caught in the prison of samsara, confused in the darkness of their ignorance, and overwhelmed by their suffering. Clearing away the darkness of ignorance, you who have been pure from the beginning, who have completed the stages achieving the highest perfection of a bodhisattva, whose princely body is adorned with 112 marks of a Buddha, I bow down to you, Manjushri, O Marabhazanandi, O compassionate one, with the brilliance of your wisdom, illuminate the darkness enclosing my mind. Enlighten my intelligence and wisdom so that I may gain insight into Buddha's words and the texts that explain them. Like the sweet perfume of white lotus, born in the ocean of knowledge, nourishing honeybees, the fortunate being, your fame pervades all directions. You are proficient and powerful in upholding the precious doctrine. To you, all of Sang Tenzing Wangda, respectfully I pray. Vietnamese prayer. Tadi gen karsa di lakdon di ngatsu lele bad shak zurwa gi sha di shagin slap shin di gorwa ane di rumbuche da gen ni ta gen na chung zo un ma thina lamrim kes ha odine man na shin di ro un man lele ro na shin ro ta wa chi di de sha on di lam so lo la ro la so no so bari une ma chi ne ro ta la de no. Before we do the short dedication, I just want to offer a clarification that in the July, so I'll take this challenge and we will keep it until my return. So we'll continue the special insight section on my return. But in the July, Geshe will go back to the way we left sort of in the beginning of the Lamrim. It's a little easier for Rinpoche to translate. And I think we were talking about 6 perfections or something. So in the July, we will do that. Okay, so. Chang Zhu Sen Zhu Rinpo Che Ma Je Ba Nan Je Ju Je Jie Wa Nyang Ba Me Ba Yang Gu Ne Gu Pe Wa Zhong Dong Ni Da Wa Rinpo Che Ma Je Ba Nan Je Ju Jie Wa Nyang Ba Me Ba Yang Gu Ne Gu Ai Zhong Sa Ji Bei Jian Zhu Ji Me Do Zha Ri Ra Lin Ji Nin De Jian Ba De Sang Jie Xin Do Me De Wu Wa Zhu Gui Nan Da Xin Xue Ba Ai Zhong Kang Ri Ra Wei Guo Wei Xin Gang De Pen Dang De Wa Ma Lu Zhu Wei Jie Le Si Wang Din Xin Yang Zhou Yi Xia Wei Si De Ba 天主节，夜当古如让那